Have you ever walked into a room, paid in full, and assumed that was enough? That your desires would be met, no questions asked? You wouldn't be the first. I'm a legal escort, and I've been in this line of work for years. Not to judge, but to witness. And sometimes to set the record straight. Many men, especially over 50, have never been taught that boundaries are not barriers. They're invitations to connect more honestly. So today, I'm sharing 5 things I never do in the bedroom, no matter the offer. Not because I'm cold or unwilling, but because I know exactly who I am and what I won't trade for a tip. If this topic feels worth hearing, like this video, subscribe and comment the word love below. I want to know who's still here with me. He came in quietly, sat down on the edge of the bed, and didn't make much eye contact. After a pause, he asked, almost as a whisper, "Do you do everything?" I've been asked this question more times than I can count. And every time I hear more than the words. I hear a man unsure of the rules, a man who doesn't want to offend, but also doesn't know what no might mean here. Does it mean rejection? Shame? Disappointment? For me, no means I'm still human. One of the first things I ever learned in this work is that agreement is not submission. That showing up, paying, and asking for something doesn't automatically entitle anyone to receive it. That I'm not a checklist, I'm not a menu, and I'm certainly not a machine. There's one particular request that always gets brought up. The position men think is the easiest, most anonymous, least personal. Doggy. They think it's neutral, even kind. Less pressure, less face, less risk. It became so popular that during lockdowns, even health organizations recommended it to reduce breath exposure. Logical maybe, but not for me. Because here's the truth. I don't want to turn away. I love watching someone's face. The twitch of a cheek when they're close. The dilation of pupils. That moment when pleasure surprises even them. That's not just sex. That's presence. And I don't get any of it when someone is behind me. I don't see their story. Then there's the matter of size. I'm petite. 1.5 meters tall. And yes, that affects everything. Not just the logistics, but the experience. In that position, I lose control over how deep or fast someone goes. And when I lose that control, I often end up with pain. The kind of pain that isn't sexy. The kind that lingers afterward, in the ache of my back, in the pressure on my cervix, in the way I walk out of the room pretending I'm fine. When people say you're so professional, they forget that professionalism includes protecting your body from unnecessary injury. It means knowing the angles, literally, knowing what works and what damages. I have positions where I can give that same intensity, the same depth, without putting myself in harm's way. But they require cooperation, not assumption. And here's something few clients ever consider: visibility. When someone is behind me, I can't see what they're doing. I can't see their hands. I can't see if they're behaving with integrity. Most men I see are kind, respectful, and gentle. But the world isn't perfect, and I've learned, through whispers from others and warnings passed quietly between workers, that the moments you let your guard down are the moments someone else decides the rules don't matter. That's where stealthing happens. That's where consent gets erased. That's where something sacred, trust, is broken. So no, I don't do doggy. Not because I'm prudish, not because I'm difficult, but because I know what it costs me. And I know the difference between giving and surrendering. There's a quiet dignity in saying, I want to see you. I want to stay present. I want to make sure that what we're doing feels good. For both of us. Sometimes a man will laugh when I say no to that position. He'll call it a preference. But preferences aren't just taste. They're survival. They're how we stay whole in a world that keeps trying to make us disappear. So here's something to consider. The next time you walk into a room and think, she'll do anything, try this instead. Ask her what she enjoys. And then listen. Not just to the answer, but to what it means. Because when a woman says, not this, she's not turning away from you. She's turning toward herself. And honestly, That's the most intimate thing she can do. One afternoon, I received a message from a man I'd never met. Polite, direct, and very generous. He offered me several $1,000s for a specific service, the kind most people don't bring up until they've built some trust. He wanted anal. He even framed it as a compliment. Said I looked like someone who could handle it. I'm sure he meant well. I'm also sure he had no idea what he was asking for. I didn't say yes. Not because I judged him. Not because I couldn't handle it. But because pleasure for me should never involve pretending. Let me explain something people rarely talk about. The amount of work it takes to prepare for that kind of session, real professional preparation, is enormous. It starts long before the client arrives. Careful eating, skipping meals, planning your day around digestion. Then the clean-out process, which is exactly as clinical and unsexy as it sounds. Enemas, patience, waiting, more waiting. Even then, there's no guarantee everything will go smoothly. It's a risk I take on, while the client simply shows up. And what if he cancels last minute? It happens, even with deposits. People change their minds. People ghost. People underestimate how complicated something is until it gets real. And all that preparation, hours of physical discomfort, emotional labor, and logistical juggling becomes wasted effort. Now imagine doing all that not for something you love, but for something you're not even comfortable with. Because here's the deeper truth. I don't enjoy it. Not in my personal life. Not in my work life. It's not about taboo or shame. It's just not pleasurable for me. That's something I've learned over time, through trial and error, through listening to my own body. Some people adore it. They chase it, crave it, plan their weekends around it. I respect that. Everyone has their own version of joy. But mine lives elsewhere. I think many men over 50 come to these experiences with a sense of pressure to prove something. That they're still adventurous, still potent, still bold. But adventure doesn't mean pushing someone past her limits. It means discovering what makes you both feel alive. That's not what this request feels like to me. It feels like a performance. One where I'm expected to smile while bracing for pain. One where the aftermath is mine alone to manage. And the thing is, I don't need to perform. I've built a life where I don't have to fake pleasure for approval. I don't say yes to feel worthy. I don't bend because someone offered more zeros. I say yes when I want to. Fully, truly, entirely. That's a power I've earned. A boundary I've chosen not to blur, even when it would be easier, safer, or more profitable to stay silent. Sometimes men hear that and assume I'm difficult, or that I must have had a bad experience. But most of the time, no trauma is necessary. Discomfort is enough. And discomfort, repeated, becomes harm. So I protect myself from that. Not because I'm fragile, but because I'm smart. You wouldn't drive a luxury car off-road just because someone dared you. You wouldn't put your favorite suit through the dryer just to see what happens. So why would you put another person through an experience she's clearly said isn't right for her? The men who get it, truly get it, never ask again. They nod. They thank me. And more often than not, they become my regulars. Because deep down, they're not looking for fantasy. They're looking for honesty wrapped in comfort. So if you ever feel tempted to test someone's boundaries, to see if a few extra dollars might shift their answer, I ask you to consider something else. What would it feel like to be with someone who only does what she enjoys? Not just tolerates, not just survives, but actually wants to be there. That's not something you can buy. That's something you earn. By listening, by respecting, and by remembering that intimacy begins not with boldness, but with care. The next request came from a man who seemed harmless, older, elegant, soft-spoken. He messaged me in advance. He said all the right things. Respectful, generous, clear about boundaries. But at the end of the message, he added, "I'd love to tie you up. Gently, of course." I stared at that line longer than I should have. The thing is, his tone was polite. His words were measured. But what he asked revealed something that many clients, especially the ones over 50, often forget. Trust isn't created by manners alone. I don't let anyone tie me up. Not because I'm afraid of rope, or because I don't understand kink. I've read enough, seen enough, and spoken with enough people in the lifestyle to know that bondage can be beautiful, in the right conditions, with the right person, and with the right exit plan. But none of those things exist in a 1-hour session with someone I've never met. Imagine this. I'm in a strange room, tied up, unable to move, unable to stop what's happening if something goes wrong. Even if the client is kind, even if he believes he would never cross a line, he's asking me to hand over not just my body, but my safety. That's not intimacy. That's risk. And in my line of work, risk isn't an exciting thrill. It's something you reduce at all costs. It's the reason I check IDs, the reason I screen, the reason I have safe calls and backups and protocols most clients never see. Because behind the scenes, every woman who does this work seriously has already heard the stories, the ones that don't end well, the ones that start with, "He seemed nice." And here's the other thing. Bondage isn't just about knots. It's about control, about who holds the power, about whether I can trust someone not to misuse it the moment they think no one's watching. When I say no to being tied, I'm not saying no to a man's fantasy. I'm saying yes to my right to move, to react, to change my mind, to protect myself. Clients sometimes think consent is something that happens at the beginning, a yes or no checkbox before the session starts. But real consent is continuous. It happens minute by minute. It needs room to breathe. And you can't breathe when you're restrained. What surprises me most is how often these requests come from older men. Men who've been in long marriages, who've raised children, who know what it means to be responsible, in business, in family, in life. And yet, when it comes to the bedroom, they forget that power isn't sexy unless it's shared. I don't think they mean harm. I think they want to explore something they've never had the chance to. Maybe they've spent a lifetime being careful, predictable, in control. And now they want to try the opposite. But the person they're asking to take that risk is me. And I don't get to leave the room and forget what happened. My body remembers. My nervous system remembers. My intuition, my instincts, they all remember. That's why I have rules, non-negotiables. Because sometimes protecting myself is the most generous thing I can do. It allows me to show up fully in every other part of the experience, warm, open, present, without fear lurking at the edge of the bed. So the next time you feel tempted to ask for something bold, ask yourself this first. Does she have the freedom to say no and still be respected? Because if the answer is no, then the rope isn't just a kink, it's a silence. And I have no interest in being quiet when my body is telling me something true. Not long after, another man arrived, and this one brought a script with him. He didn't even say hello, just walked in, smiled, and said, "Hey, mommy." I tilted my head, not out of confusion, out of calculation, trying to decide whether to laugh or to correct him. I chose the latter. "Please don't call me that," I said softly. It wasn't the first time, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. There's a pattern I've seen more and more with older men, especially those over 50. They arrive with a script already written in their heads, a fantasy they've been building quietly for years. She's a mistress, or a goddess, or a stern disciplinarian in leather boots. She'll call them names, hurt them a little, order them around, break them down and build them back up. And when they see me, gentle voice, soft eyes, professional demeanor, they decide I must be able to flip a switch and become the woman they've rehearsed in private. But here's what I wish more men knew. Your fantasy doesn't become my job just because you paid me. I'm not a character. I'm not a role you can assign. I don't shapeshift on command. Yes, I'm here to give pleasure, but not at the cost of my identity. And dominance, real dominance, is not just about shouting orders or stepping on someone's chest. It's a dynamic that requires energy, experience, and consent from both sides. It's a performance, yes, but only when both actors want the same play. I've had clients send me entire scripts in advance, pages of dialogue they want me to say, nicknames I'm supposed to respond to, scenarios I'm expected to memorize and perform. And when I say, "That's not my style," some of them act shocked, as if I've broken a silent agreement, as if my refusal is a betrayal. But I never agreed. Being assertive is one thing. Being forced into a role I didn't choose is another. And when someone shows up expecting me to degrade them without ever asking if that's something I enjoy, they're not hiring a companion. They're hiring an echo chamber for their own needs. The irony is, I can take the lead. I often do. It's part of the job, especially with clients who feel nervous or uncertain. I know how to guide, how to create a rhythm, how to keep the room warm, focused, safe. But guiding someone isn't the same as dominating them. I don't bark. I don't insult. I don't transform into someone cruel just because you've mistaken intensity for aggression. And I certainly don't tolerate being assigned roles that make me uncomfortable, just so someone else can play out a script that never included my voice to begin with. What frustrates me most isn't the request itself. It's the assumption. The assumption that I'll just go along with it. The assumption that I should enjoy it, because he does. The assumption that, because I'm a sex worker, I must be a blank slate for someone else's projections. I'm not. I'm a real person, with real preferences, with a carefully chosen tone, pace, and energy that reflect who I am, not who someone wants me to pretend to be. When clients respect that, something beautiful happens. The encounter becomes real, grounded, even playful. We can find the heat between us, not from playing roles, but from showing up as ourselves. But when they don't, when they insist I call them baby or loser or whatever title makes them feel a certain way, they miss the entire point of intimacy, that it's co-created, not performed. So if you ever book someone and expect her to fit perfectly into your script, pause for a second. Ask her what she likes, what she doesn't, who she enjoys being, not just what she can imitate. Because the moment you let go of the fantasy, you might actually get something better. A real connection. One where no one's acting, no one's pretending, and no one walks away feeling invisible. Then came the quiet ones, the men who didn't want a fantasy but a lesson. He was sweet, nervous, kind in a way that made me instantly want to make him feel safe. About 10 minutes in, he paused, then said, "Can you teach me? I want to know how to be better. I've never really figured women out." I nodded slowly, not out of agreement, but empathy, because I knew what he meant. I've heard it dozens of times, from divorced men, from widowers, from those who never quite found the rhythm of intimacy. They don't come to be pleased. They come to learn how to please. It sounds innocent enough, noble even. But here's what they don't realize. Asking someone to be your lover and your instructor at the same time is more complicated than it seems. Yes, I believe in communication. I believe in feedback. I'll gladly say, "That feels good," or guide a hand in the right direction. That's part of any healthy experience. But there's a big difference between giving feedback and delivering a full lesson plan. Because teaching, real teaching, is a skill. A practiced, nuanced, sensitive craft. You don't just walk into a session and expect someone to assess your knowledge gaps, tailor the content to your emotional comfort level, and provide a satisfying outcome. All within the hour. And yet, that's exactly what some men unknowingly ask for. They want me to explain why what they're doing isn't working. Why their ex-wife never responded the way they hoped. Why every move they make seems to be met with distance, confusion, or silence. They want me to diagnose decades of misunderstanding, then fix it. But that's not what I offer. Not because I don't care, but because that kind of teaching requires two things I can't give in a paid, time-limited encounter: emotional context and long-term trust. I don't know your history. I don't know your triggers. I don't know what makes you freeze up, or what messages you've carried since your first crush. I can't see all of that in one evening and hand you a neat, empowering answer. And if I tried, I'd be guessing, gambling with someone else's vulnerability. Besides, there's something most clients don't realize. Direct sexual instruction can feel humiliating, even when it's well-meant. Saying, "That's not quite right," is different than saying, "No, you're doing this wrong." The second hits the ego like a freight train, especially for someone who already doubts his worth. If a man isn't ready to hear that kind of feedback, and most aren't, he'll either withdraw or overcompensate. Neither response leads to pleasure. That's why I set this boundary clearly. I'm here to share, not instruct. I'm not your sex coach. I'm not your therapist. I'm not a surrogate standing in for the woman who never explained what she needed. I'm here to enjoy you, as you are, and to invite you to enjoy me, as I am. Some clients say, "But how will I ever learn?" And I say, by listening, by asking, by noticing the small things. Because here's the quiet truth. Most of what makes someone great in bed isn't technique. It's attention, curiosity, the willingness to be present, not perfect. The courage to say, "Tell me what feels good," and then actually listen. You don't need a lesson plan for that. You need presence and humility, and the kind of patience most people forget to bring to pleasure. I don't refuse to teach because I'm unkind. I refuse because I respect the work of teaching, and because I don't want either of us to leave the room feeling like it was a test. This is supposed to be connection, not correction. So if you come to me, or to any woman, looking for instruction, ask yourself first, are you willing to learn not just what she wants, but how she feels when she gives it? That's where the real education begins. And the best part? You won't need a classroom. You'll just need to care. By now, maybe you've realized this wasn't just a list of things I won't do. It was a reminder about presence, boundaries, and the quiet kind of courage it takes to stay true to yourself, even in the most intimate moments. After 50, what truly matters isn't your wallet. It isn't your experience. It's your willingness to show up as you are, without roles, without assumptions, without fear of hearing no. Because no is not rejection. It's an invitation to connect more honestly. I've shared these stories not to shame, but to offer clarity. To say, yes, I'm here with you, but I'm also here for me. And if you walk into a room and meet someone who has the strength to say what she doesn't do, you might just be in the company of someone who can also offer you something real. If this story made you pause, even briefly, to reflect, like this video, subscribe to the channel and comment the word "love" below. Maybe what you're looking for is the same thing someone else has been waiting to share.